Thank you for inviting me, and welcome to everybody. Hopefully, you're getting some good tips out of the day's events. Um, Coming on the back of it, hopefully, I'll lead you into lunch. Hopefully, you'll get some extra tidbits from me as well. So, again, thank you. So, as I said, we're talking today about what we've been doing over the last few years with DFMPro in terms of applying it to improve our design best practices. A little bit about me before we get started, though. I'm an old hand, been in the industry quite some time, a lot of grey hair now. Joined GE Healthcare. GE Healthcare is a division of GE, if that's not obvious. But 11 years at GE Healthcare right now. I joined them in around 2010. I moved from the UK to Wisconsin with my family. If I join in the presentation today, you have to forgive me a little bit. We're still homeschooling with the pandemic. My passions, obviously, apart from mechanical design, involve ping pong in my basement, which is still a sore topic. I haven't fixed that basement yet after a pretty disastrous leak. But GE Healthcare, who are we? We obviously are a division of GE, like I said a minute ago. We make medical devices, specifically, we make devices that look inside you, MR machines, CT machines, X-ray machines, ultrasound machines. We also have divisions that make machines that look after you. So things like if you're a really premature baby, we have machines for that. If you're in the ICU, we have monitors for that. If you're undergoing surgery, we have machines for that. We make medical device machines, basically. I think if you multiply our first quarter earnings by 4, you'd be around $16 billion revenue company. I believe we're about 40,000 employees. We're very global. I think we sell in 140 countries, manufacture in 45, design in 17 design centers, as you can see there. The green dots, the bottom left diagram, they illustrate where our design groups are. We're an acquisition-based company, so we buy market leaders and assimilate them into the crew. And one of the reasons for the global breadth, the global cultures, is because we've acquired companies over many years. GE Healthcare was one of the original divisions of GE. We've been making medical equipment since the 1920s when we started with X-rays. You can see some pictures there. You can obviously Google us and find many more pieces of information about us. A couple of things about the business strategy in healthcare. Obviously, it's a big pandemic right now. Everyone's probably heard of that. COVID has changed everything for us. Not just the material shortages, the chip shortages that are happening right now, not just for us, but for the entire industry. But in terms of what customers want, and this is a little bit interesting because it's kind of similar to what DFMPro is. They want software assistance. So mechanical is actually a really relatively small part of our engineering workflow. We really consider ourselves a software company. So customers are after AI and machine learning algorithms to improve the workflows, improve the productivity, things like that. It's kind of similar to what we want to do with DFMPro, which is have software assistance to improve the productivity, improve the results. We've got some big initiatives in the business. None of these are really radical, but they are somewhat for us. Again, if you consider the history, we're an acquisition company. So we want to be good at platforming. So we're pushing really hard to get a lot more standardization and platforming thinking into the business. And the chief executive of GE, so not just a GE Healthcare, is reinforcing lean. So it's obviously no surprise that the production costs, the costs of quality and other costs are waste, if you're familiar with the lean methodology, and we want to target those for reductions. So coming to DFMPro, we've been using it quite a while, 2013 in fact. I'll come back to that, but we've been seeing less and less of these types of things. A fastener embedded in the plastic too close, plus cleaners, plus stress can bring a factory line down, or maybe cavitation in the molds can be unseen in the final part, but again, over time with stress and cleaners. By the way, COVID cleaners are incredibly aggressive against plastic. I'm sure lots of companies have experienced that just recently. Or maybe you just suffered basic design flaws. A lot of our engineers don't design parts like this every single day. So as to what Joe was saying earlier, DFMPro is a great way of getting those rules into the hands of people who need a brush up, and then obviously you can click to the help and get a nice diagram about what's going on. I like to think of it more the other way around though, which is it's a proactive tool. It's not just a catcher. Certainly we use it more on the left than on the right, but it really gives you opportunities, and we've seen a couple of groups use it to take their existing machined parts and then help them develop versions that are injection moldable, for example, and use it in a more of an iterative process to get what you need. So that's, you know, we're pretty happy with what DFMPro, and extremely happy with how that team over at HCL operates. Extremely customer centric people. But we obviously know that we can't stay static. We need to move forward. So the costs of quality and change are significant in our business. We just threw a few examples up here just so you can sort of size it. I'm sure that these numbers are equally applicable to yourselves, but unnecessary changes straight away after you've released to production can start racking up the costs. I think Nambi alluded to this, is that once you get to real products, and that's the difference I keep trying to explain to our management. Software might be the strategic imperative. We need those software assistants, but ultimately your costs and your costs of failure are extremely high once you start making physical products, whether that's a circuit board or a machined part or an injection molded part. One thing I didn't mention on the GE Healthcare overview was how many people we have. So we have approximately 800 mechanical engineers, and we kind of believe that about 275 or maybe 300 would be the core, if you like. So the people that do the core design work for us in the mechanical realm. And based on those numbers, and looking at the license logs and the like, we came to a stab that we're about 20% of our realization of value from our investments in DFMPro, and not just the tool, but the training, the IT support, and all the rest of it. And we want to get much closer to the 100%. We've been doing this a while, and we got a new strategy to try and get there. So again, just to repeat, the opportunities are just bonkers huge once you get to manufacturing. Just the engineering productivity, we believe, could easily justify a DFMPro. I think Joe was alluding to that as well. The tooling rework, and so it's kind of a connection to that 20% here. We mandate for tooled parts that they get analyzed with DFMPro, and before an appropriations request is made to go buy that tool, we have to have evidence that someone's considered DFM, and the easiest way of doing that is with DFMPro. If these things creep through, and as things sometimes can, those factory outages are monstrously expensive, extreme stress events, as you can imagine, and even worse if we were letting something into the field that needs to be field replaced. The volumes of our products in the market, plus the costs of taking a field service engineer or replacing that unit, reworking that unit, they can run into millions in a matter of days if you're not careful. So there's a huge amount of need to get it right the first time. I think Joe was alluding to that. We don't always do that, unfortunately, and we're always striving to be better. All right, so back to what is our strategy? How are we going to move that 20% needle up a bit, towards that 100% goal? we had a lot of discussions. This is not rocket science. You need to talk to your users, figure out what the opportunities are. One of the things that we always hear and can never do is that you have to, pass DFMPro for all parts. We haven't got the ability to do that yet. As I said, the tooled parts have got that requirement, but the complex machinings, the assemblies, the sheet metal parts, they all suffer a low level of problems that cause engineering change, but they don't rise to the level of tooling rework or a factory outage necessarily, and therefore we don't get to force that function, if you will. It's kind of interesting because that's where DFMPro really first started, was watching a design process that had iterated a draw in a particular part no less than 12 times and had singularly failed to spot that the hole was right next door to a wall. And then obviously machining tolerances play into it and you get X-ray breakout, which is a very bad thing in a CT machine. So these things do happen. Unfortunately, they will continue to happen until we mandate it, but we want to do better with that. So we want to encourage people before we hit them on the head. And we want to make it as easy as possible. So DFMPro is not pre-installed, configured by default. Nambi talked about users suffering tools fatigue. Yep. I wish we only had 4 tools to use at GE. It's a lot more than that, but yeah, certainly tool fatigue plays into the problems. So we'd like DFMPro to be pre-installed, configured, and configured by default. And obviously there's the never-ending quest to do more with it. So additional rules to cope with different situations, very, very small parts over in our Finland group. How do we handle that better, and so forth. So I think everybody on this call watching this presentation probably knows everything there is to know about DFMPro from a use what it does perspective, but connecting it back just briefly as a user, it's very nice and easy. I think it was mentioned a few minutes to take a part like this and run it in the tool, and you get these nice plots that show you the most egregious errors relative to one of the checks, and obviously there's a range of failure. One of the it's still a barrier, but one of the barriers is, and I certainly would feel this myself, is that nobody as a designer likes being told their baby is ugly. And I think along the way, HCL Geometric changed some of the language, and there's certainly this new UI pattern that they've implemented has made it much more of an assistant as opposed to a poke you in the eye type of feeling when you ran the tool. So it gave you advice as opposed to told you were a really bad designer. Now, one of the gentlemen that helped set up the original rules, he had a really nice line that stuck with me ever since, which is ultimately manufacturing can often cope with the risk. It's when they don't see the risk that things start to become problematic. So what he meant by that was, if he knew that there was a potential for a problem in this area of the part, they can change the inspection criteria very easily. But if you don't know there's a risk in that area of the part, then you're going to suffer problems and yields. So his point was, you can't always make it perfect. Obviously, we'd like you to try, but if you can't make it perfect, DFMPro does a really excellent job of making it easy to document. This is the areas of risk in the part, so that additional production controls can be placed on it. A lot of people assume that this is about getting engineering to do more work. We actually have a slightly different take on DFM, which is, we believe we need to tap the brakes. So instead of parts flowing freely down and being made and spending money on them, we want to do things digitally. So we want to tap the brakes We want to make the design reviews improve, not from a speed perspective, but from a results perspective. So by the time our final formal reviews happen, as you say, the biggest risks have been taken care of and have been discussed, and that's what we want at GE Healthcare. It's all about the big money. Once that 70% of your cost is locked in, you're kind of stuck. So we want to reduce the huge amounts of money regarding manufacturing defects and scraps, and obviously engineering change is expensive as well once you're in a regulated industry that requires a lot of objective evidence and revalidation, re-verification of changes. And that can all add up very quickly. And obviously, to the point about field services, we don't want those. They're something that we absolutely want to avoid wherever possible. And DFMPro's helping towards that. That's the message. We're pleased with it. We're just not there with adoption. So, there's a whole range of how do you get people to change their ways. Tool fatigue is one of them, right? So users will not go and read the help file themselves. So last year we arranged in consultation with the DFMPro guys. That, as I said, that team's awesome. We ran a whole series of webinars, lunch and learns, caught people at their lunchtime. There's nowhere else for them to go. So we focused on specific fabrication processes, so injection molding, machining, sheet metal, and assemblies. And we walked the users through what it is. So there's now over 250 people who know what DFMPro is, have seen it in action, and have witnessed that session at least. And that was the goal, is to make sure that everybody who was one of those core users was aware that there's a tool that can help you right there in Creo. The other thing, we've changed strategy a little bit since the early days. Users can make their own rules. So obviously they can't replace the GE Healthcare rules, that we still provide those rule files, but we let the users make their own rules. And that was something we actually hobbled in the initial years, and we think we made a mistake there. So now we let the users configure their own rules to suit their own needs, and we think that partnership versus regimented top-down approach, we think will entice people to come into the environment. We as IT people obviously are after getting value from the IT investments. So that's point 2. We made a little change there, and then point 3. This, I guess, goes to the tools fatigue. Is it can take a little bit of time to install new platform on anyone's engineering desktop. If you've got anywhere near the number of users we have that are in the different time zones, it becomes problematic again. So we wanted to combine. We always want to combine. So we're not distributing DFMPro. We're distributing Creo. Creo Parametric is our CAD system. So we don't distribute DFMPro as such. We wanted to distribute Creo 7, and then DFMPro is just considered part of Creo. That's how we wanted to feel. So that was our suggested strategies. And just to recap how that strategy for installation has changed over time. So back in 2013, we did wrap the DFMPro installer with a silent installer. Again, the help files that they do provide are very, very usable. The support team there are very helpful. We wrote silent installer over the top of their silent installer, and we said to people, if you need to use DFMPro, come over here, download this installer, and then double click it and run it. And you can see the result of that is that the only people that used it was the motivated users. So that was the people that were forced to use it because they have to produce a DFMPro report to get past their appropriations request, or it's the users that are really motivated, and one would assume that they're going to get it either way. So we weren't so enthralled with that. But the point was, we started out like that, and then in 2020 with our Creo 6 release, sad to say, we got a bit lazy and we went back to what might be a normal process for someone, which is take the DVDs, put them on a website, provide a document that says this is how you install it, and go do it. So obviously you have to be both motivated and accurate at that point as a user. And suffice it to say, it produced a lot of support problems, and we beat a hasty retreat from that strategy for our Creo 7 release, where we decided to try and shut the excuses department with installation and actually produce a one-shot installer. So I mentioned installer a couple of times, and the as I said, in 2013 we started off with this silent installer wrapper, and honestly we were never really perfectly happy with that process. The reason you install DFMPro, as we found out, is because from an IT perspective, it is running as a separate tool inside a separate piece of memory, and therefore you do need to have it talk to Creo and vice versa. And that talking requires installation, and when I say installation, I mean writing information into the Windows registry, registering a server process and things like that. That's how it runs. So we came to a conclusion that we did need to do an install, but we didn't like just installing everything and not having full control over it. So we wanted to dig deeper. And as I said, our goal is as easy as one of these Amazon buttons. Press a button and it will install Creo. It'll install DFMPro, which is for us is just part of Creo, and it will configure that DFMPro to use the special GEHC rules and the database for our plastics and so forth, all in one shot. That's all we wanted, and we wanted to have low-level control. So the secret sauce here was that HCL can provide you with a copy method installer. And yes, there's still a line in that installer that registers a server process. But other than that one line and some prerequisites, this is basically the same way we do Creo, which is that we install a working Creo on one of our lab machines, and then we copy that thing and we paste it. It's a very expensive paste, but we paste it into 800 machines. That's how we wanted DFMPro to work. We were just going to paste Creo, which of course would come along with DFMPro. So again, massive thanks to Pranav and Yogaraj for organizing, the insider information sessions and really explaining what is it you're trying to do and what is the minimum installation you need for this thing to work. And we then took that information. They provided, basic BAT files, and we wrapped it with our own installation preferences, which is we use an NSYS based open source installer toolchain, and we already have that for Creo. As I said, we have a Creo installer that does basically takes a whole series of files and copies them into the right place and sets up a few folders and so forth. And we have the DFMPro version of that, and that is triggered off the same Creo installer. Yes, it could be ran outside of it, but we have it automatically running with our Creo 7 installer now. And it will not only install DFMPro and register it, it'll also make sure the rule files are copied over and the database files in the right place and so forth. And we don't have any user variability in that. Is our ultimate goal. Yes, this package is pretty darn big. We utterly hate network drives in the GE Corporation. User management is pretty annoying, and we don't have a way of making a network drive available to anyone in the company. So we'd have to use a manage who could get access to a network drive. So we don't do that. So we put it on our box.com servers, and then users will just install Creo, and as a result they'll download this big zip file, unzip it, and double click install Creo, and everything else will run. So that's our strategy. And the DFMPro side, because obviously that's more interesting to folks, they need to install these prerequisites, so Visual C, .NET libraries. We've never ever had a support case with those, so we let those MSIs run. We have our script just execute those. Install of Creo and DFMPro is just a copy, so we just copy the files to the right place, and then we do a register, which is a register server command, and our script elevates its permissions to the right level, so that if the user doesn't have to worry about right click run as admin and things like that. And then obviously minimal setup for environment variables and a bit of cleanup. And the cleanup was very important for us because, as I said, we had a year of utter variability and support case hell, because we let the users just click and read a website and click what they wanted. And if it's not obvious, the result, hopefully you can see this picture at the bottom right. That's our expected result, is that DFMPro would not only be running, but it's going to be running connected to the rules. We've in 2020 we ran into a lot of problems where people would get DFMPro working, but it wouldn't be connected to the rules, wouldn't be connected to the database. And DFMPro for us out of the box produces this unbelievable long list of complaints for, say, for an injection molded part, and a lot of them are bogus because it wasn't connected to the right material, or we work with molders that are okay with that level of risk and so forth. So that was the user's first experience. That was our goal, is to get the user's first experience up to a really good level. And here's an example of some code. I believe all these slides will be available for people after the event. I do have more slides than what we're showing today, but the code surrounding, for example, the rule file. So now with the later versions of DFMPro, you can set using a straightforward XML file rather than having to worry about environment variables or registry settings. You can just have a file on disk, which is much more in alignment with what we do with Creo parametric. Almost, from a technical perspective, we're very happy. So obviously this is only the first part of our goal to try and get that 20% adoption needle moved up. But so far, and this deck was locked in a few weeks back, but we're now up at 400 users installed with Creo 7. We have had one failure, I'll admit. The failure was the user decided to delete the DFMPro piece of the installer before they then ran the Creo one. So that gives you an impression of just how creative our users can get. But for everyone else, DFMPro is now available. It's there on the menus. They can click and they can run. So that was technical success. You're configured, your predictable result, and no more users variability involved in that. So again, just a big pat on the back to HCL. They really helped us here and do that. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have been anywhere near as successful from a technical perspective. So it's really over to us now. This is really be interested to see what I would say about this next year. So we've now eliminated what I call the excuses department, which is, oh, I didn't run DFMPro because I didn't have it installed, or oh, I've switched to Creo 7 and I didn't install DFMPro, or yeah, I've got it, but it's producing really weird results, and then it just kind of doesn't happen properly. So that excuse has gone away. We're now, if you install Creo 7, DFMPro is working. It's configured with our out of the box. Yes, you can make your own rule files and increase that, but out of the box, you get in the GE Healthcare guidance from the experts in manufacturing who set those rules up. The other thing we do is we brand that Excel file. It's kind of a silly thing, but it says GE on it. It's pretty important try and bring people back to what's important. You know, our brand is extremely important to us. It stands for quality, reliability, and functionality. And you know, just a simple thing like making sure everyone reminds them that we're not doing this for giggles. This is for real. This is for people. Real people will be underneath our machines being scanned, and we need to focus on quality every single day. As I say, DFMPro, nice thing for us is they're very synergistic with our lean initiatives and platforming and standardization, and we think we can get a bang for the buck by joining our awareness and continued adoption efforts with that. And just to round it up with the amount of opportunities that we're talking about here, so in the millions and millions is what we think, and we're only 20% of the way there, despite being in the business since 2013. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there.